I'm going to start tonight because I have three aspects to the presentation. I have a GIS presentation, which is interactive, and I'll try and show you a little bit of that. But for safety purposes, I put a lot of it onto a PowerPoint presentation, just in case there was a problem with it, and I'm going to run through that quite quickly. It's going to detail, I suppose, some of the issues in regard to the pretty catastrophic flooding we had in Bandon in November. I live in Bandon, and I was there firsthand to see what happened and documented a lot of it, and have put it together in this presentation. So that'll lead on to emergency preparedness and disaster management, which is the last part of the presentation. So I'll be dealing with land use planning and planning decisions that have been made as well over the last while in Bandon, and how they may or may not have affected flooding in the town. So if we look at the Bandon catchment area, that's Bandon River catchment area. It's actually a vast area, nearly 60 kilometres or more in length, one of the largest river catchment systems in Munster. And it all flows towards Bandon, which is located here. It starts in the mountains up behind Dunmanway and Bantry. Bandon town itself, you've got the main river flowing through the town, the undulating landscape that's there, and then other feeder rivers that are flowing into it. But when you look at the catchment in terms of the main urban areas that are there, you have Dunmanway, Ballyneenan and Mesquite, Bandon itself, and Inishannon. And the main problem in terms of flooding has been in Bandon. This is the bottleneck for it. There has also been problems in Dunmanway and in Inishannon. If you look at the equivalent of a lunar landscape of the catchment, this is what it looks like. And you can see the hollows in it, and naturally, when you look at the catchment and river flow in the area, they generally follow the lowland areas. The catchment itself is quite vast. It's not just one single catchment. Each one is broken down into an individual catchment, so there'd actually be about 90 to 100 catchments within the Bandon catchment river area, each responsible for a particular stream or a tributary that feeds into the Bandon River. Now, when we look at November the 19th, generally the only statistics that have been bandied about in terms of rainfall have been in regard to Cork Airport, because Cork Airport is the nearest Met station that has continuous monitoring in regard to Bandon. But I only found out in November that there's also a Met station voluntary run in Bandon, Ballyneenan, Carberry have one because it's an IPC licensed plant, and there's another voluntary individual who undertakes it voluntary in Dunmanway. Every day they've been recording rainfall for many years now, and they've put together quite a substantial amount of rainfall data that Met Office use. But it's not automated in the same way as what Cork Airport does. And there's quite significant differences in the rainfall patterns that are showing up within that catchment area. Cork on the 18th, if we look at the 3 days preceding the major flood in Bandon and Cork City, Cork Airport had 51.2 millimetres of rainfall on the 19th of November, 12 on the day before, and then 7.2 2 days prior to that. If we look at Dunmanway, they had 73.5 millimetres of rainfall on the 18th and 27 on the 19th. That's a very significant difference between Cork Airport and Dunmanway, and yet none of this data is fed in properly into a catchment model for the Bandon River area or for an early warning system, because they don't have one. Carberry milk products, 65.4, quite close to the 73, and in Bandon town, which is an urban area in terms of monitoring there, 55 millimetres. So all of these locations down stream, we could call it, of Cork Airport had significantly more rainfall than Cork Airport on the day before they had the record-breaking rainfall in Cork Airport itself. And that would feed into the evidence that I saw on the ground, where when we came to looking at the catchment itself and was this a flood that was something that was just an uncontrolled event that happened in the space of a number of hours, or was it something that built up over a course of 48 hours or over the course of a number of days or weeks, is evident in my observations from the town itself, and I'll go through some of those in the presentation. So we're going to focus in on Bandon. There's a satellite image of Bandon, and the yellow shows the urban area of Bandon itself. Then you have the rivers that feed into it. This is the main Bandon River, and these are the tributaries that feed in. These two of particular are of interest to us. So you have the main river itself, flows through the town, split like most towns, north and south. Nearly every town in Ireland is built on a river system and city. So we're looking at the flow of water into Bandon town. Now, before the 19th, before Bandon flooded, you had a flooded area of the river that exceeded all the ways up and continued on for some miles outside of Bandon. This was all extensively flooded, all of those fields. In Bandon itself, just up to the boundary near the weir, you had flooding, and next to this development here, there was a significant amount of water built up that, in terms of, when you look at Inniscarra, for instance, or I worked in the mining industry for 10 years, when you look at tailings dams and the amount of water that would be allowed to be controlled from the point of view of within a dam itself before you had an engineering issue that you had to deal with, water was to the top of the embankment. Normally you're supposed to have a freehold of about 1 metre between the top of an embankment and water levels that are within that containment. Before Bandon even flooded, the water was to the top of the embankment that had been built to exclude water from that area. And that's in this location here. So you had literally millions of gallons of water built up before the 19th of November, and as that heavy rainfall of the 18th came in overnight and travelled from Dunmanway down to Bandon, it led to a catastrophic situation where a dam here actually breached, and I'll go through some of that in terms of what happened in the town. This is what happened. Impact assessment, and they don't reference the fact that the OS map states that it's on a floodplain. You have a serious issue in terms of objectivity, and that's what happened in this instance. There was no mention in the flood impact assessment of anything in regard to the location of the development, that it was on a floodplain, and the report was 4 pages in length. And this report is important from the point of view of decisions are made by planning authorities on information that's submitted to them. So if I, as a developer, employ you as an engineer or as a consultant to write a report for me and submit that information to the planning authority, well, then you're going to have individuals in the planning authority who will take that information as for granted because it's written by a qualified engineer or consultant, and you have no reason to doubt the conclusions or objections, or not objections, but the conclusions or recommendations of that report. But in this particular report, and this is 2006,